Let's move to this story next. South Africa will present its case against Israel before the International Court of Justice next week. The court has allocated 2 days to hear arguments. Israel says its legal team will present its side of the argument. For the latest from the Middle East, we are now joined by SABC correspondent Trent Murry. Trent, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. Just quickly, let's start off here. So yesterday there was the statement that was issued by the Israeli government as well, making it clear that they will be countering this application that has been brought by South Africa. But what are the analysts saying about whether South Africa has indeed a case against Israel and whether the ICJ would accede to its request to have this onslaught stop?
Well, look, we understand that certainly the Israeli government has been taking legal advice on South Africa's case, and the legal advice, according to multiple media reports, is that the case that's been brought by Pretoria does have quite a reasonable chance of succeeding, and for that reason the Israelis now are a bit concerned about what to do next. We understand that they will certainly be arguing that case. They've described South Africa's move as irresponsible, calling it a blood libel, and they say they will argue against it in the court. But I guess what happens next is really what we need to focus on, because if the court issues an injunction calling on Israel to stop its military operation in Gaza, then it will put enormous pressure on them in terms of how they respond. Do they agree to that order from the ICJ? If that was to happen, that would mark a huge turning point in this war. Or do they ignore that ruling and continue to push forward with what the Israeli government has said is its military goals within the Strip? If they were to ignore it, well, then I think not only does that have huge legal ramifications, but then it opens up some very real questions about what do Israel's big allies do, like the US, the UK, Germany. It will be very hard for those countries to sell a message back home to their domestic audience that Israel should be allowed to ignore an international Court of Justice ruling. Look, we're not there yet, but we certainly know that that kind of wargaming, for want of a better expression, is taking place here within the corridors of power, and they are trying to chart what will happen next week when that court sits down. But one thing we can say with absolute certainty is that the fact that South Africa has brought this case has really in many ways thrown a huge spanner in the works, I think, for the Israelis and its diplomatic effort trying to convince its allies that it needs to continue to push forward with this operation.
Yeah. And I also wonder, Trent, whether this matter then becomes further complicated, considering yesterday what happened with that Israeli drone strike that killed Salah al-Arori, who is one of the founding members of the political bureau of Hamas, as well as its military wing, and the possibility at all of this war actually expanding. What's Israel saying?
Yeah, so look, let's be very clear. Israel hasn't actually claimed responsibility yet for this strike. It is very likely that it was them, but they haven't officially done it. But what we do know is that they have been saying consistently that they are going to hunt down the leaders of Hamas regardless of where they are. And it certainly would appear in Beirut that they have now carried through with that threat. But we have to just stress, I mean, Salah al-Arori was effectively the deputy leader of Hamas, deeply involved in its military affairs. He was even touted as a future leader himself of the group. And so we know that this really will strike at the core of those multiple Iranian-backed groups that consider Israel their enemy. All eyes now really on the response. It could come from multiple directions, but I think the most worrisome one certainly here is that it will be the Lebanon-based Hezbollah group. That is because not only have they said they will retaliate, but it's a group that made a threat with the fact that they've got an arsenal of 150,000 missiles and rockets by most public estimates. So for that reason, the Israeli army is saying today it remains in a state of high alert up on that northern border with Lebanon. It would appear that this conflict in Gaza, the arena of that conflict, has now expanded to include Beirut, and with it the risk of escalation or miscalculation has risen significantly.
Yeah. And what are we hearing from Hamas? Have they responded to this attack at all?
Yeah, well, Hamas have responded again, saying that that this crime, in their view, won't go unanswered. We've seen huge crowds of people gathering in the West Bank for a funeral service that we're expecting to take place in coming hours. Many of them rallying behind Hamas. I think we also just have to pay attention to the situation in Gaza, because certainly we know that because of the IDF's operation, much of Hamas's rocket launching capability there has been degraded, but they do still have it. I mean, they fired rockets.
Oh, that's our reporter there, Trent Murry, joining us from Tel Aviv, of course, following reaction to that statement that was issued by the Israeli government that they will be defending themselves at the International Court of Justice, and now the response that has come from Hamas following the killing of one of its leaders. And of course, this happened in Beirut, and the fear is that this could mean that the likes of Hezbollah could actually respond, and we could see this particular ongoing war that started on the 7th of October, at least last year, could actually expand to different territories. We'll try to get an update again from Trent Murry a bit later on.